I'm Rahul Sethi. This is my mother Sunita Sethi and my brother Rohit Sethi. They are the ones that spurred the CBC to create a defamatory report against Swami Adi Narayan, previously known as Swami Sai Premananda. As you will have noticed, I'm not in the CBC report at all. The CBC never approached me for comment before deciding to air the report. If they had, they would have realized that my mother and brother are by no means legitimate sources for information, and that Swamiji had done no wrong to anyone. The report was prompted by my mother and brother in some form of deluded retaliation to me leaving my family's home, to be with a woman they did not approve of, whom I have loved, and have been happily married to for 7 years now. My mother, father, and my brother expressed to me on more than one occasion that Nina, my wife, would not be welcome in their home. So I left their home, and they in turn attacked Swamiji because it was in his services that Nina and I first met, became friends, and fell in love. My family wanted Swamiji to break up my proposed marriage to Nina, but Swamiji would not interfere in this family matter. As a result, my mother began to create confusion in the community about Swamiji, defame him, initiate lies against him and his teachings, all to get at me. The Toronto police had understood my mother's tactics and said about her, she was a woman trying to create dissension in a spiritual group to get at her son. Before the CBC report aired, my mother had assaulted Nina. She hit Nina in the head and gave her a concussion for which my mother was arrested in the middle of the night. My mother had to plea bargain to not have a criminal record of assault. This act of violence led to my mother receiving a restraining order against her. For a defined period of time, she was not to come near us. Why didn't the report capture this? Nina wanted to speak in this video as well, but to avoid further hostility against her from my mother, we decided against it. The CBC did not capture any of my mother and brother's aggression towards Swamiji. The report stemmed from my mother's anger toward me for marrying a woman that she did not approve of. Swamiji faced the brunt of my mother's anger and her want for control over my life. My mother, my family, used Swamiji as a scapegoat to deflect what they would face, and eventually did face, from their relatives and community about attacking their son, me, due to who I wanted to marry. John Lancaster, the CBC reporter, did not speak about how my mother brought a group of people to our temple to harm and disrupt our services. The police were called during this disruption, and they were in attendance to protect us from harm. John Lancaster instead took either false information or things out of context to concoct a story that he likely thought would get more views. This report was not factual, but sensational journalism that lacked objectivity. Journalism that tries to rouse an emotional response from an audience, rather than reporting facts and details. John Lancaster did not talk about how my mother stalked members of our spiritual group and crank called them at all hours of the night, till many had to change their phone numbers. He did not talk about how my mother even went to group members' homes and screamed at them from the street. The police had to give my mother numerous warnings, and once she was warned by the police to not harass one family, she would then just go to another family's home and harass them until she was warned again, and so on. She quickly learned that she had to be told by the homeowners clearly that she was not welcome on their property for any police action to be taken against her. The report did not talk about how Peel police prohibited my brother Rohit Sethi from trying to make any type of contact with group members because of his harassment, and if he violated this order, he would be arrested. Due to the constant torment by my mother and brother, many of the families with Swamiji left his organization. My family's aggression was so severe against Swamiji, and yet the CBC report captured none of this. John Lancaster states in the report how Swamiji's website was taken down and his center was closed down. Lancaster twists these facts into implying that Swamiji and the rest of the group were hiding something. However, the harassment and aggression by my family onto Swamiji and the rest of the attendees was so severe that the police had directed Swamiji to remove all forms of public contact to maintain safety for himself and others. The police suggested that all programs stop for some time, as my family, on 3 separate occasions, had also sent people with ill intentions to the programs and to even follow people to their homes so they could find out where they lived. Why didn't Lancaster tell this side of the story? In the report, my mother accuses Swamiji of stealing children and turning them against their parents. She's really referring to me here as a child. When this report was first conducted and eventually aired by the CBC, I was 26 years old. I had began lecturing at the University of Toronto during this time, and I worked another full-time job. I was well into adulthood. I had also been attending Swamiji's programs for years prior to my mother making such accusations. My mother had even attended and enjoyed a few of Swamiji's services herself. It was not until I decided to ask Nina to marry me and told my mother about my intention that she turned severely against Swamiji, Nina, and I. In the report, even the accusation against Swamiji made by the man from a Toronto Sai Center stems from my mother. The man never attended any of Swamiji's services and had no relations that attended, and yet he refers to parents saying to him that they can't control their children. But this was just my mother speaking to the man prior to the report. Also, Lancaster makes it clear on more than one occasion that this case was concerning adults, which is what the police expressed to him. So why again did Lancaster avoid telling the truth and keep information absent to continually defame Swamiji? After the report first aired, I spoke to its producer, Nazim Baksh, and expressed how appalled I was at them not approaching me and perpetuating untruth against Swamiji and those that attended his services. The producer apologized to me over the phone and expressed how his team were under a time constraint with this story. He expressed how they chose to leave out certain parts of the story to complete it and be done with it, even though they knew of my mother's arrest for assault and the police warnings against her. He expressed how that was a misjudgment on their part, and he agreed they should have spoken to me. The CBC removed the report from their website soon after my conversation with the producer. However, my mother and brother received a copy of the report prior to this, and so my family continued to use it as a form of sabotage to Swamiji's good name via YouTube and other places online. The reality is that my family, namely my mother, severely overstepped in her want for control over my life, that she attempted to wreak havoc on Swamiji, attendees of Swamiji's services, Nina and her family, and I. My mother, Sunita Sethi, used anyone that was willing to listen to her lies and hate to get at me. Following the airing of the CBC report, and despite the numerous police warnings they received, my mother and brother even created posters with Swamiji's face and mass mailed it throughout his neighborhood, insinuating that he was a danger to children and the community, to which the police had to answer calls and tell people this was not true, that Swamiji was under attack and being maligned by false accusations from someone in the community. That someone was my mother, my brother. Because of my mother's aggression nearly 6 years ago, even before she assaulted Nina, I filed for a restraining order against her. Nina and I changed our address, our phone numbers, our emails. I also left one job to have some semblance of privacy and security from my mother. It so happened that my mother and father even came to where I teach to accost me further and were banned from entering the campus again. After a number of years away from my family, I did try to give them chances to have me back in their life and to accept Nina, but this was in vain, and I have come to understand that they will never accept our marriage. It has been nearly 8 years and they still haven't. I have also come to understand that my mother has an unhealthy obsession with me that has led her to stalk me over the years, such as by staying outside my apartment building when she discovered where I live to get a glimpse of me, following me in her car thinking I was unaware, and even going so far as buying a house down the street from where I live once I tried to reestablish a healthy relationship with them. There has been so much that has unjustly happened to Swamiji apart from the CBC report, that has stemmed from my mother's aggression and her obsession with me. Swamiji bore the brunt of my mother's aggression over the years, and he not once stopped standing up for love. It is my hope that after watching this, you are better informed on what had occurred and have come to understand that what was expressed in the CBC report is not what they make it seem. Instead, Swamiji was made to suffer simply for loving and standing up for love. For a complete understanding of the truth, please visit www.thecontroversyclarified.wordpress.com. The link is also in the description below the video. Thank you.